And we're live. Please feel free to go ahead and launch the training. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for welcome you in this second session of the Learning Center 2021. This event is hosted together with our friends and partner of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the United Nations Climate Convention of Climate Change, and the Executive Director of UNITAR. This event is dedicated to launch an e-learning course that is studying and tackling the issue of synergies between climate change and sustainable development. More than ever, it's important to understand that the Agenda 2030 is directly linked with the effect of climate change. There are a lot of examples in which climate change has an impact on agriculture and deforestation and rising the sea levels in the Pacific Islands. And so these have a huge impact on the achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Agenda 2030. So we were asked by our friends to put together all the information in a learning training course to be easy to understand and to also bring these synergies together or point of contact between the Sustainable Development Agenda and the climate change. So we are very pleased and very happy to make this tripartite event with UNDESA, UNITAR, and our dear friends of the United Nations Climate Change Convention. In order to frame the conversation and in order to understand UNITAR's position, I am very pleased and happy to welcome the Executive Director of UNITAR, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Nikhil Seth, and we will follow Mr. Besarman, who is the Vice Director of the United Nations Climate Change Convention. And then we will go to a panel conversation among distinguished ambassadors here in New York. Mr. Seth, thank you for being with us. Welcome from your office. I will yield the floor to you at this point.
Thank you so much, Marco. And let me start by greeting all of you, my friend Oves from Bonn, all the distinguished ambassadors who are gracing us with their presence to share with them their own experiences from their countries on some of these important issues that we are dealing with. And of course, thanking both Amy and UNITAR in New York, as well as UNDESA for supporting this venture and UNFCCC. They are the custodians of everything that happens around climate change. So I'm very happy to see them participating at such a high level. The launch of this course gives me a special pleasure. And let me explain why. In the early 90s, I was an active delegate to the climate change negotiations, as well as the development of Agenda 21. Subsequently, I swerved towards the kinds of issues covered in Agenda 21, including subsequently the development of the MDGs and the SDGs. And throughout this process, right, for the last 2 or 3 decades, I've often wondered why these discussions followed parallel tracks. One, the climate change process focusing a lot on greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, and the need to mitigate and adapt to the consequences of excess anthropogenic emissions, while the other focusing on more human needs and human fears, including issues around poverty, on hunger, on equality, on jobs, on health, on energy, on cities. Part of the reason, of course, was the nature of these discussions, because one was a convention and the other was soft law as defined by the kind of legislation we adopt in the General Assembly. But these issues, the themes are so enmeshed that unless we look at the synergies between climate change and the SDGs, we risk diluting the political will for changing our trajectory of growth to one which is lower in carbon intensity and one at the same time which looks at the issues which are so central to the SDGs, including the ones that I mentioned. Climate change actions need greater focus and ambition for the nationally determined commitments, as they're called. And it is as much about the SDGs as it is about greenhouse gases. Similarly, not only the SDG 13, and I want to remind everyone that when we were negotiating SDG 13 on climate action, it was very clear that the primacy of the climate process was in the convention-based UNFCCC process, and that marker was put even in the goal on climate in the SDGs. But all the SDGs are linked to climate change: energy for all, water, sustainable agriculture, and also things like gender equality, peaceful and just societies, sustainable infrastructure. They all crucially determine our GHG trajectory. Now, we've seen in the COVID crisis that the increase in extreme poverty, and there are figures that 150 million more people have been pushed into extreme poverty. And yet we are seeing also the tremendous increase in global greenhouse gas emissions and record-breaking temperatures globally. And these are all linked. And one looks at the solutions to all these problems, particularly the trillions of dollars that are going to be spent on coping with the fallout of the COVID crisis, to re-energize our economies, our societies, and what is being done in the area of renewable energy, and the whole list of issues which are part of nationally determined commitments. We see how important looking at these issues together is, because the expenditures that the world is going to incur now are crucially going to determine the trillions of dollars that will be spent, will crucially determine how we will do on the NDCs and how will we do on the SDGs. Without more ambitious actions on climate, the world community will not reach the goals of the Paris Agreement and keeping the climate change and global temperature increases in check. It is very clear also that if we don't have sustainable agriculture in our water scarce world, we don't dramatically change our farm systems, if we don't provide modern sources of energy for all, if we don't have sustainable cities, if we don't meet our goals on water and sustainable agriculture, we will neither achieve the goal of the SDGs nor have SDG ambition imbued in the outcome of what is going to happen in November, COP26 and Glasgow. So we have to look at these things together. And as countries seek to address these interlinked challenges that exist both in the climate and the SDG spheres, it presents an unprecedented opportunity to raise climate ambitions, to leave no one behind through effective actions, and to accelerate progress on the 2030 agenda. It is under this context, this idea of productive collaboration and training, bringing together UNDESA, UNFCCC, and UNITAR was conceived. Our mission in UNITAR is, of course, to bring about attitudinal changes. And I think particularly here, the negotiators, whether they are engaged like in the HLPF on the follow-up of the SDGs, or the climate negotiators will be deeply engaged in the outcomes of COP26, we need to change their attitudes. We need to change their understanding of some of the issues that we are going to address in this course. We need to provide knowledge products for all of you out there. And I'm so happy to see that there are over 220 participants joining us for this training from all parts of the world. And we are creating these e-learning courses, and we've created a multi-module, comprehensive and interactive e-learning courses that addresses the kind of issues that I'm talking about in a much more systematic and comprehensible way. And we have put in a lot of effort in developing these SDG courses. These courses are not new. They build upon the 2019 Climate and SDG Synergies Conference and the 2021 Synergies Learning Series. But these provide much more depth to policymakers with tools and evidence that may be used to advocate for climate action linked to the local context. And we've seen, especially in the poorer parts of the world, local actions are dictated much more by the kind of issues we see in the SDGs than they are by purely looking at climate change actions. Today at the launch event, we are very happy to include insights from the representatives of all the distinguished ambassadors who are present here and countries who have already embarked on creating these synergies between their NDCs and their SDG plans and their budgetary allocations to all these kinds of activities, which is the heart of change at the national level. This is just the beginning of a very long journey, and through the power of learning and education, it is our hope that more policy makers, decision makers, scholars, students, and individuals who are passionate about our beautiful future will learn and try and do things differently. We hope that more institutions and organizations and the private sector will join us on this journey and realize that these synergies have to be factored in as we progress towards the world we want. So I thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to your comments and your discussion and description of what your countries are facing as you try and bring these things together. Thank you, Marco, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seth, for framing the conversation today. It's so important that we tackle and start to see this link between the climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals agenda, as you rightly pointed out, and also that the issue that education plays a crucial role on this process. And this is basically what an e-learning course does: simplify information and education for all the beneficiaries, diplomats, government officials, and academia as a whole. Before we proceed with our dear friend, I would like to check if the Undersecretary General, Mr. Liu Zemin, is with us already, or is just a link open? I think just the link is open. We will continue with the program, and it's a pleasure to welcome the Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Climate Change Convention, Mr. Ovais Sarman, who is joining us in this triple exercise with UNDESA and UNITAR. We are very pleased to yield the floor to you, being one of the partners and being one of the custodians of the climate change initiatives. So thank you very much for the support you have been giving us in preparing this training course. I will very appreciate it if you convey to your team to deepest appreciation for UNITA for their cooperation in preparing the materials. To you, Mr. Ovais.
Muchas gracias, Marco. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, and Nikhil, it's a great pleasure for me to be with you today at the official launch of the training course Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergies. This is a joint effort between our very pertinent and meaningful partners, UNITAR, of course, and DESA. And I'm a great believer in training and education. So what UNITAR does is extremely important, relevant, and meaningful to the work that we do. I'll get into that in a bit more detail. Right now, as we all know, we live in a time of complex and interlinked challenges. We stand at a midpoint in a crucial year that will define the coming decade, both with respect to climate action and achieving the SDGs. The global COVID public health crisis has caused loss of life, human suffering, and economic and social stresses at all levels not seen in decades. There is continued poverty, as just mentioned, in many countries around the world, with increasing socio-economic disparities. The effects of climate change are getting more and more evident. And despite the slowdown during the COVID-19 pandemic, scientists and development policymakers are alarmed by the trajectory of projected rise in global greenhouse gas emissions. The good news is that the essential blueprints to protect people and planet already exist, as was already mentioned by Nikhil, the Paris Agreement, of course, and the 2030 Agenda, and its set of 17 development goals. Together, they give us the roadmap to building a more sustainable and resilient world. They provide us with a long-term vision of what the future could look like one that considers the health of the planet, all forms of life, and the sustainable use of its resources. This vision is clearly reflected in each of the SDGs. When it comes to SDG 13, to which we are closely linked to, climate action, there is no doubt that climate change is a threat multiplier, impacting most other SDGs, whether we are talking about poverty, hunger, health, clean air and water, or access to education, land management, energy, and economic opportunity, to name a few. All are impacted by climate change, one way or the other. The symbiotic relationship between the SDGs and climate change, it is also a dynamic one. Each are deeply intertwined, each impacting the other with respect to progress or delay. That's why when we consider any of the global challenges, we must consider the cross-cutting nature of climate change as we are experiencing it right now. The e-learning course, Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergies, provides a fantastic opportunity to share the science, the evidence, and the tools that enable cross-cutting climate and SDG action. It'll provide an opportunity to hear about concrete examples and demonstrate the potential of tying climate action to job growth, poverty reduction, human health, financing, and food security. And therefore, we must rise to the challenge of our times. As countries seek to address these interlinked challenges, trillions of dollars are rolled out to address the post-COVID recovery. There is an opportunity to accelerate that transition away from fossil fuels and high emissions-based economies towards economies that are low carbon, sustainable, and resilient. We need transformative ideas to drive what must be a transformative decade. This training, promoted and developed by UNITAR and our organization, UN Climate Change, UNFCCC, UNDESA, will foster the sharing of those ideas, tools, and examples, providing the policymakers with the evidence they may use to advocate for climate and SDG synergies. I once again like to most sincerely thank UNITAR for all the training materials that they have developed and worked and roll out around the world. And we are very much in support of what you do, UNITAR, everyone in UNITAR. So our sincere thanks to all of you. So thank you very much. And I look forward to a successful discussion today. Back to you, Marco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obeys, for these inspiring words. Is undeniable how important the topic is. And I guess the presence of all these participants around was scrolling. And I hope if you do it to see the panel, they are coming from all over the world to listen, to see what is the United Nations doing about climate change and sustainable development goals. So I will not go through the name of the countries, but I am so happy to see the outreach that this event is having. And it's exactly because the nature of the discussion, sustainability and climate change. So thank you to you for your time. Thank you to your team again. And we will continue to collaborate from New York, and 100% sure Mr. Seth is also keen to continue the institutional collaboration from Geneva. Now we're going to have a conversation with the permanent representatives here in New York. One of the leading countries in this ecotourism and climate change is Costa Rica. So I am honored to welcome the permanent representative of the sister country in Central America, Ambassador Rodrigo Alberto Carazo from Costa Rica. Ambassador, thank you very much for your time. I yield to you in the benefit of time for all of us and to learn from your experience.
Muchas gracias, Ambassador Suazo, and very glad to be here with you. The invitation that was addressed to me was very clear, where we invite you due to your government's contribution to demonstrate the importance of synergies between SDGs and climate change, end of quotes. Climate catastrophe, we call it. And we are very clear in as much as that the opportunities to address both this catastrophe, climatic catastrophe, and the biodiversity crisis are time-bound. It is clear from models that we are approaching points of no return. If current trends in lifestyle and greenhouse gases emissions peak by 2030, then it will be not possible at all to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade. In the same line, if threats on biodiversity are not slowed significantly or halted in the next 9 years, it's not longer a two-digit figure, we will also reach a point of no return for multiple ecosystems and species. Costa Rica believes that all climate catastrophe policies and all development policies, plans, investments, and actions undertaken to achieve the 3 goals of the Paris Agreement and to build back better should take into consideration, we insist, the intrinsic connections between human rights, climate change, biodiversity loss, and sustainable development. The coming months will be decisive, and processes such as the UNFCCC and the Convention on Biodiversity conferences of the parties provide unique opportunities to enhance coordinations, to underline synergies, and to seek ways to align ambition with effective implementation. Synergies between climate, biodiversity, and sustainable development through nature-based solutions are many. Greenhouse gas emissions reductions through fossil fuel phase-out, energy demand reduction, sustainable consumption, sustainable land use, storing carbon to mitigate climate change, maintaining areas of vegetation to protect against higher temperatures, preventing further climate-driven increases in storm severity and frequency, and the providing of a range of other services such as pollination and treatment of pollution. Ecosystem services are generators of livelihoods and sustainable development, sustainable business development. $100 trillion in economic value estimated. We have an opportunity to protect and to value natural assets, and we have the resources and the technologies necessary, but currently only 0.008% of available finance is invested in nature. Nature-based solutions enhance the resilience of ecosystems and of societies. And this is key for the long-term sustainability of our economies, for our health, for our food systems, and even for our infrastructure. We're talking about our very survival. For Costa Rica, forests and ecosystems are an integral part of our development agenda. With conservation through our payment for ecosystem services program in the last 30 years, we have managed to reverse deforestation, to increase economic growth, and to provide the platform for one of our most important sources of income, which is the tourist sector. Many people in Costa Rica benefit from this payment of ecosystem services, $60 per year per hectare for protecting the environment in such a way has, as I said before, reversed deforestation and increased by the double that amount the covered area in the country. We hope to lead by example in policy. Our decarbonization plans and programs, pushing for initiatives such as the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, which we believe are key to keep the momentum going, especially in times like these when more urgent matters sometimes upstage equally important issues. The main goal of the High Ambition Coalition is to focus on the importance of protected areas. And therefore, the coalition is championing the proposal to protect at least 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030, in line with scientific advice. The increased target should harness the knowledge of indigenous communities, prioritize intact ecosystems, and focus on areas most important for biodiversity and climate. For an effective implementation, we insist we must harness science, technology, finance, and partnerships. We require more finance and to better direct flows towards investments that preserve nature rather than those that destroy it. We need to create opportunities for entrepreneurs to develop new products and for industries aligned to sustainability to generate a low carbon, nature positive market. We believe in people-led conservation approaches through indigenous and local communities, and especially by empowering women and youth to combat inequalities and to ensure a just transition. Costa Rica is convinced that the environment agenda is the best tool we have to build back better, to recover greener. My country has experienced this firsthand after decades of a true development alliance with nature that has been somehow ingrained into our DNA. The solution to the climate and biodiversity crisis are within our reach and are in nature-based solutions, in the enhanced protection and the conservation of the ocean, and in a reimagined sustainable development models with a systemic approach aimed at generating well-being for the people, for all people. The more we invest in nature, the more nature will give back. Over 3 years ago, Costa Rica launched our national decarbonization plan, and it has been estimated that it will generate over $41 billion in net gains for the people of our country in the next 30 years. We strive hard, we will strive harder because time is limited. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think that there are, in our own region, in my own country, if I say so, we can take example of Costa Rica's work and Costa Rica's example on sustainable development and in preserving nature, and particularly in the ecotourism industry. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I think is a very well learned lesson for all of us. I am pleased now to welcome the Excellency Permanent Representative of Nepal, Amir Bara, who has been supporting UNITAR when we make a call. We are so friend that we have a problem in presenting you, Ambassador, because we feel that we have a debt with you for always being with us and supporting us and speaking in our events. I know that Nepal is a beautiful country and have so much also to share with us. I make echo of the words of the Ambassador of Costa Rica, that we can find climate disaster for we have to cope with all the challenges that the planet has given us, nature per se, but also what we create ourselves in certain cases. Ambassador, I will yield to you for your presentation, and thank you once again for being with us.
Thank you, Ambassador Suazo. Thank you for your good words. Excellencies, ESC, Mr. Nikhil Seth, and Deputy Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, Mr. Ovias, and distinguished participants. At the outset, I'd like to thank UNITA for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this important event. And I really appreciate the UNITA's initiative in this topic. Even in this time of COVID-19, the climate crisis remains one of the greatest existential threats, and the COVID-19 laid bare our inherent vulnerabilities, and it jeopardized economic growth and put achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals at risk. And in this desperate time of crisis due to pandemic and as well as climate change, we must have a coordinated and comprehensive approach to deal with this multifaceted problem around us. And coherence in the implementation of climate action, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development policies, and scaled up investment is key to enhance effectiveness of our action and efficient use of resources. And we must establish the narrative that the climate action and economic growth are not only compatible, but they are also interdependent. And climate action is not anti-development, and progress on climate action would significantly ease the path towards achieving SDGs related to poverty, hunger, access to water, terrestrial and ocean ecosystems, forest, health, and gender equality, and empowerment of women and girls, among others. As a party to the Paris Agreement, Nepal strongly supports the call to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. We are committed to deliver climate resilient development pathways by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. Nepal submitted its NDC in December last year. It's a second NDC, and which includes quantifiable targets for the short term and medium term, and covers energy, waste, agriculture, forestry, and other land use. Nepal has also identified adaptation priorities and action across thematic areas such as agriculture, food security, forest, biodiversity, watershed conservation, energy, health and disaster risk reduction and management. And this clearly manifests our ardent commitment towards climate action as well as SDGs implementation. Despite the negligible contribution to GHG emission, countries like Nepal are facing adverse impacts on climate change. The COVID-19 has further added stress on both SDGs and climate financing. Robust climate action, effective SDGs implementation, and resilient recovery from the pandemic hinge on the access to climate financing and affordable technology. And we urge that development partners must fulfill their commitment of mobilizing US $100 billion per year by 2020 to support climate action in developing countries, because they have not met this target. And distinguished participants, harnessing climate and SDG synergies in the implementation of decade of action and COVID-19 recovery is critical to raise climate ambition and to accelerate progress on 2030 agenda. And building the resilience of people and livelihoods, communities and societies, economies and ecosystems for achieving sustainable development goals should be our priority in this decade of action. And COP26 in Glasgow this year could be an important opportunity to enable accelerated implementation of not just the Paris Agreement, but also 2030 agenda itself. And in conclusion, only the coordinated and inclusive and synergistic efforts across sectors and actors throughout the globe to address both climate change and SDGs will make a difference And guided by the agreed principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, wealthy countries must take the lead by exemplary action in the climate action, and also in the implementation of SDGs as well, so that no one will be left behind as we committed. Thank you, Ambassador Suazo, and back to you.
Thanks to you, my dear Ambassador, for sharing your token of information and also your experiences with us. We have a broad audience, as I mentioned before, from every part of the world, and I am 100% sure that they are benefiting. So for your information, also the session is recorded, and you will be finding out if you wanted to see it later on and to review the presentation that our colleague Amy Changes will do on the content of the e-learning course. I am honored also to welcome Mrs. Joanna Cedeño, who is the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Dominican Republic, who will share also Dominican Republic experience on climate change and also in the Sustainable Development Agenda and the work of the Dominican Republican government is doing to achieve the agenda. Joan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us. I yield to you.
Thank you so much. I have to thank you, Ambassador Suazo and UNITAR, for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of the elements of this important conversation. Just to begin, I want to inform that we will be presenting our second VNR this year in the framework of the HLPF, where you will find more information on how these two agendas need to work hand in hand, as has been previously mentioned. Also to recognize, allow me to recognize Ambassador Suazo, the amount of people connected to this event, to this course. And I'm sure there's a lot of young people out there from all corners of the world, and to them, I really thank them. Wish to thank their engagement. We really need your voices added to this conversation. So just to thank you and colleagues, in the context of our collective recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic, harnessing climate and SDG synergies is not only a necessity, it is imperative. There will be no effective global recovery without increased climate ambition, including for adaptation financing for the most vulnerable countries. The cost of our climate inaction, compounded by the COVID pandemic and its effects, will simply be too much to manage, so we have no option than to act. Therefore, the new UNFCCC process and the COP26 allows us an opportunity for increased global ambition in the context of the Decade of Action, where for many, many countries, the realization of the 2030 agenda might be even more compromised than ever before. Ambassador of Nepal already mentioned how critical this process is and how we need to make sure that all parties to the convention come to Glasgow with the political will and the tools to make the real commitments for implementation. Now, the Dominican Republic is already exploring concrete ways to address the impacts of this pandemic, the climate shocks that we naturally have been always are vulnerable to, and the economic stress in the SDGs and the 2030 agenda context by already monitoring key indicators, including the specific impacts on women, girls, and young people, and applying the social support and effective protection policies towards the most vulnerable. For us in the Dominican Republic, the necessity to build back better needs to be hand in hand with climate change adaptation. Now, the starting point for us is that there is a high level of alignment between our national strategy for development and the SDGs. So that brought us a good context to the achievement of the SDGs in the context of the climate crisis or the climate catastrophe, as Ambassador Carrasco mentioned earlier. The opportunities that we are envisioning at the local level in these unprecedented times include the creation of jobs at massive scales in the context of the green recovery. Let's say that is giving us an extra excuse for the creation of green jobs. That is mainstreaming such an approach to traditional sectors, such as tourism, energy, and agriculture. Now, I wanted to stop and talk about a little bit about tourism. Of course, the Dominican Republic, as you know, depends in high measure on tourism. And we are looking at a renewed approach towards our most important economic activity to make it more sustainable, more inclusive, and with a greener impact on the environment, and with specific targeted activities to achieve many of the SDGs, meaning make tourism work for the SDGs and vice versa. We are fully convinced that the green recovery will have a great impact, not only for our generation, but most importantly, for the future generations. And we must make all our COVID hardships worthwhile and build back better and greener so the 2030 agenda remains a reality for all. On mitigation, I wanted to share that just last October, by presidential decree, we created a mechanism to measure, report, and verify greenhouse emissions in order to better design mitigation measures. This will have a huge impact on policymaking as we move forward. To conclude, Ambassador, just a few thoughts on adaptation. Talked about mitigation, but adaptation for us is key as a small island development state. Public and private financing for adaptation will be key, and we are working towards that. There is no way governments alone will be able to win this battle against climate change. We need more financial accessibility for the most vulnerable countries. For example, seeds only can access 2% of the global climate financing currently. 2% only of all the money out there, seeds only can exceed to 2%. This needs to change radically. And above all, we have to make sure that this financing is also available for small scale enterprises, the regular people, the people that dedicate themselves to agriculture, to tourism, etc. And we must integrate all climate risk actors in the decisions and policies that we are taking today towards recovery. And above all, we have to continue to build climate resilience. A country like the Dominican Republic will always be prone to natural disasters. We have no way to escape. So our only option is to build climate resilience. It will save money in the long term, and it will allow us to achieve the Agenda 2030. We have no doubt about this. This is what we are striving to do in the Dominican Republic. And as I said at the beginning, we invite you to join us as we present our VNR on July 13 at 3:40, where we will talk in more detail about all these issues. I thank you again and at your service for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Cedeno, for sharing with us your experience and from the perspective of also a vulnerable island development state. We in the Central American Isthmus also suffer so many those calamities from natural disasters, in particular in the hurricane season. So your participation is highly appreciated, and your support and collaboration to UNITAR is also well recognized by all of us. Dear participants, dear panelists, it's a pleasure to see Mr. Liu Semin, the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. Is he available for delivering a keynote remarks, Mr. Liu?
Hi, this is Mr. Liu's assistant. Our sincere apologies as Mr. Liu is still with the president of ECOSOC, in a press conference. He will try to join us very soon. We would be grateful if you could move on with the following speakers first, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll appreciate. Yes, I will set this event, the launching this e-learning course has a endeavor of 3 institutions, very important institutions, the United Nations Climate Change Framework Convention Secretariat, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNITA, will not be possible if we do not have a teamwork. And the teamwork from UNITA is composed by Amy Tianguizao, Mr. Pelayo Alvarez, who is supporting us. But the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs have his own team to work shoulder to shoulder with us. And I want to pay tribute to them, to Nadine Salameh, to Minuri Takeda, to Bahar Sayedi, to Merve, and to Dylan Grant for supporting us in the content and also in the development of the e-learning course hand to hand. I will yield now the floor to Ms. Amy Tianguizao, who will highlight us what is the content and the methodology of the e-learning course. Amy, please proceed.
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon to everyone who is connecting to the launching event from different parts of the world. It was said on the program that this section is an overview of the e-learning course, but for me and everyone who has worked on the content, the structure and the design of the Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergy course, we know all too well that this isn't just another learning material. It is a statement for the always existed, often ignored positive relations between pursuing climate goals and implementing SDGs. It is an attempt to introduce new sustainable business possibilities for stakeholders by making the case. And last but not least, it is a toolbox that can be deployed at any time by decision makers and curious individuals to identify and harness climate and SDG interlinkages and eventually become advocates themselves and provide guidance on different industry levels. From the previous introductions and panel discussions, we learned that the ideas behind this e-learning course were based on 4 current global challenges: poverty, inequality, climate change, and pandemic. While we are fighting against these harsh realities, it is my responsibility today to tackle this one challenge that everyone might face in under 10 minutes. I'm going to show you how to register for the UNITAR e-learning platform, locate the course, register for the course, how the course looks like for learners, and most importantly, how to obtain a certificate of completion after you excel the course. So right now, please allow me to share my screen real quick with everyone. There we go. Okay. So first of all participants who are interested in attending Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergy course are required to create a new account on the UNITAR event page. If you have already had an account with us, please log in, which I did right here. Please log into your account through the UNITAR event platform. Afterwards, you can access the Learn at UNITAR platform, which is right here. You can access the Learn at UNITAR platform, which is also known to be the hosting platform for all the e-learning courses, and choose login with unitar.org/event. Now you're logged in on both the UNITAR event platform and Learn at UNITAR platform. At Learn at UNITAR platform, go to course and choose New York. The title of the course, Harnessing Climate and SDG Synergies, and then enroll with the enrollment key Climate and SDG. I understand that it is a lot of information, which is why we have this flip page right here to help you navigate the sign-in process. Once you enter the course, you can see that the course is broken down into 1 introduction module and 3 content modules. Each module focuses on a specific theme. Within each of the 3 content modules, there are different lessons which you have to complete. You will advance from introduction module to module 3 during the duration of the course. When you click enter in the introduction module welcome page, you will see a new window pops out, leading you to the module content. There are hyperlinks embedded everywhere in the course to provide you with additional information on the concepts or the backgrounds of specific terminologies. During the module, you will encounter your first interactive exercise. These exercises are designed to facilitate your learning outcome. In other words, interactive exercises within the pop-up windows are not graded. All you have to do is to click on whatever answer you think is right, and you will get the immediate result to find out if you're right or wrong. These questions are simple and based on the knowledge in each section to help you remember what you have just learned. Different from the interactive exercises within each module, you can see that each module also comes with a mandatory quiz back to the learning platform. You will need to pass the quiz that is affiliated to each module in order to finish the course. After you complete all the requirements, you will be able to unlock the e-learning certificate of completion to prove your accomplishment. This course is a free, interactive, and informative addition to our extensive e-learning course library. Participants can finish the course following their own pace and schedule. Although the content targeted policy and decision makers, we believe that this course can benefit people across industries. It is also a great introductory course for students who want to learn more about incorporating SDG agendas while eliminating the impact resulted from climate change. It wasn't that long ago when the mortality rate took over half of the space in every single news title because the number were simply too long. It wasn't that long ago, and I know that it is still a current state for many of us, that we only hear the voices of our loved ones through videos and audio devices. In the UN Environmental Emission Gap Report published in November 2018, it mentioned that to achieve the goal of eliminating climate, climate change to 1.5 degrees, countries would have to increase their level of ambition by 5 times. Pandemic has only compounded the situation as it threatened to reverse progress on the global goals. It disrupted implementation towards many of the SDGs, and in some cases, turned back years of progress. We have discussed a lot about what have happened during the past year, and now we are ready to talk about building back better. And this course symbolizes a beginning of a more digitalized and more open future with different possibilities. During the past few months, with the significant help from our colleagues from UNDESA and UNFCCC, we have developed this e-learning course without meeting each other once in person. I am thankful for my department for the enormous trust that you have endowed on me and the determination on not only being the source of knowledge, but also to always be innovative, creative, and responsive to the changing situation. Thank you to Bahari, Anna, Dylan, Nadine, Murph, and Ralph for your significant input on the course. We couldn't have done it without you. And last but not least, thank you, dear participant who's connecting from everywhere around the world, for your interest in this event, this e-learning course, and your constant passion, curiosity, and commitment to contribute your effort into creating a future that we and our future generation deserve. I'm sorry that the flip page, the sharing screen was having a little bit of trouble previously, but let me just share real quick in 5 seconds on the menu that you are going to receive after the course. So this is a menu on how to register for the course. And you will have a general sense of what the course looks like in each module and the course objectives. And most importantly, you'll have a sense of how to register and the course overview. And of course, at the end, if you still have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I will type my email address in the chat box. Thank you guys so much for your patience and time, and I will give the platform to Ambassador Suazo.
Thank you very much, Amy, for this technical aspect of the e-learning course. I am really pleased and honored to welcome the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Zemin. Mr. Liu, we have covered some introductory remarks by Mr. Nikhil Seth, by Mr. Ovais Sarman, Assistant Secretary Generals. They greet you well. Mr. Seth have something else to attend also. Today, we launched this e-learning course that was done shoulder to shoulder with your team, your department, and with the United Nations Climate Change Convention Secretariat. And we have more than 250 participants. So we have also the ambassador of Costa Rica, Nepal, the Dominican Republic, and South Africa. So we are very honored and pleased that you are with us. And I know you are a very busy man, because today is also the kickoff of the high-level political forum. And with the COVID situation and the in-presence meetings, time is very limited in some cases. So we highly appreciate for you to give us some keynote address on relation that e-learning and synergies between climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals, which you are pioneer in the United Nations Economic and Social Affairs. To you, Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco. And dear colleagues, I'm sorry for late because I was just escaped from the press briefing on our SDG report 2021. The briefing is still there. I just made my briefings and left without for the Q&As to my colleagues. So I'm so honored to join my colleague, my friend, Nico Sess of the Director of UNITA, and also Deputy Executive Secretary Ovais of UNFCCC for this joint event. This event to launch the e-learning courses on climate SDGs synergies is brought to you by UNITA, UNFCCC, and the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. I think I appreciated the strong support by excellencies, a number of ambassadors who have already made their comments. I appreciate their support. Dear colleagues, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provide the best framework for tackling today's most pressing challenges, including climate change, poverty eradication, and inequalities. They also establish a compass to direct recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite increasing efforts over the past few years, it was already evident in 2019 that we were not on track to achieve many of the SDGs. The pandemic had further worsened this outlook. We are also off track with the climate goals, with 1.2 degrees centigrade warming above the presidential levels already reached over the past year. We will not succeed with either agenda if we work with them in isolation. But by adopting an integrated approach in the implementation phase, we can make progress towards both. Indeed, an integrated approach would strengthen synergies and alleviate trade-offs. Integrated planning, coherent policies, and targeted investments designed to meet both SDGs and climate challenges can generate significant co-benefits and speed up progress. Both climate actions could yield a direct economic gain of $26 trillion by 2030. This would be a good economic opportunity. Compared with business as usual, fossil fuel subsidy reforms and carbon pricing alone could generate $2.8 trillion in government revenues by 2030. Investment in renewable energy technologies creates jobs and can spur broad and sustainable social and economic development. Renewables accounted for estimated 11.4 million jobs worldwide in 2019. Reducing emissions of greenhouse gases through better transport, food, and energy use choices can result in improved health, particularly through reduced air pollution. You know, colleagues, I think until now we have around over 3 billion people. They are not using clean cooking fuels. In addition to say, around 800 million people still live in darkness without electricity. So this is the area we need to work. Dear colleagues, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals enshrined in the 2030 Agenda, together with the Paris Agreement, are our blueprints for inclusive and sustainable future that leave no one behind and protects our planet. Since 2016, the high-level political forum, this annual one, we just started the 2020 annual political forum today, has been making a vital contribution to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda by assisting countries in maximizing and tracking their progress. At this year's high-level political forum, the thematic review of SDGs also includes SDG 13, which relates to climate action, along with several other goals. That's why I think our launch of this, our e-learning courses also contributes to that review of the SDG 13. Later this year, the COP26 of the UNFCCC presents a critical milestone. Member states will have the opportunity to showcase their ambition via the submission of their enhanced NDCs and the long-term emission reduction strategies. Harnessing climate and SDG synergies in COVID recovery plans, in updated NDCs, and in national effort for advanced SDGs present an unprecedented opportunity to advance the progress. Colleagues, the launch of this e-learning course taking place in margins of this year's high-level political forum helps to illustrate and enhance the integration of the two agendas. One is 2030 agenda, the other agenda of climate change. At the UNDESA, we are committed to work together with our partners, including UNFCCC Secretary and UNITA, to support stakeholders in strengthening synergies between the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. This e-learning course builds up on our collaboration over the past several years, as well as outcomes of the 2019 Climate SDG Synergies Conference that jointly initiated and hosted by UNFCCC and the UNDESA since 2019, and the 2020 and 2021 learning series, the online consultations. So along with the launch of the e-learning course, I'm pleased to inform you that the summary reports from the most recent dialogues on harnessing climate and SDG synergies held in 2020 to 2021 are now available online with detailed recommendations for policymakers and practitioners. Dear colleagues, as we approach the upcoming political milestone this year, including COP26 in November and other related high-level meetings, such as those on energy, we shall have a high-level dialogue on energy in September, and the food system, with the global food security system also in September. We have a global sustainable transport conference in October, and a biodiversity COP also in October, and the ocean conference in next year. All these events, through all these events, to let us join hands together to advance a truly joined-up approach to the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. Colleagues, before closing, let me also share with you that we are now working with the UFCCC Secretariat to resume our convening of our high-level conference on the synergies between COVID-19 and Paris Agreement in 2022 in a member state country. We're planning that we should send invitation to all member states and stakeholders for the event. I thank you. Before closing, I also thank to my colleague, my friend Nico says, and those always for their joint effort, for the support to this joint project. I thank you.
Thanks to you, Mr. Liu, for joining us. I know your heavy schedule and press cannot wait. I know that it's a pressing need all the time. So thank you for your inspiring remarks. We are very proud and happy to have you. And as I said at the beginning, very, very honored to have worked within my team in New York and with your team in the UN. There's Amy already mentioned the names and then they really pull it out together. I will invite Mr. Seth to do a few closing remarks and to wrap up just in a very short manner because of time constraint. Mr. Seth?
Well, I can only say how grateful I am to USG Liu and OS and our partners who make events like this happen. Disseminating knowledge in an intelligent way is complex. It's not only content, which is important, but also how we use the new methodologies and pedagogy of learning. How do we reach people, especially our younger people, who learn so very differently from our generations? We used to listen to long lectures and read thick, turgid books, but our younger generations today want wisdom and knowledge given to them in small bits and bytes of no more than 150 characters. So we've tried to adapt to the new learning methodologies. And I'm so happy that by developing this particular course, and I congratulate Amy on the hard work she has done in making this possible. And I want to thank all the ambassadors for the insight they've provided from the perspective of their countries. There's nothing more enlightening than to hear national perspectives. We sometimes in the UN tend to talk about these things theoretically, but to get ambassadors to talk about their experiences, their challenges at the national level of looking how these synergies work. I speak to a lot of ambassadors and PRs in Geneva, and I get very different perspectives from PRs of developing countries and PRs of developed countries. From developing countries, I always hear this they weigh in on the SDGs much more strongly because that is what preoccupies their attention and the attention of their governments, particularly issues like poverty, hunger, ignorance, and health. But on the other hand, the dangers caused by climate change, they don't see as clearly as the scientists and as the ambassadors from the developed world. So it's very necessary to bridge this gap in perception. You can't have prosperity without taking action against climate change, just as you can't have any action on climate change without focusing on prosperity for all. So I just wanted to end by thanking you all once again. And I look forward to myself being a part of this training, Amy, when you organize it for me. Thank you so much. And thank you, USG Liu, once again, for your wonderful remarks and for being present here with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seth. Thank you. And goodbye from New York, dear participants. You will find all the information and we will ship it to you. Please keep in touch with us. Ambassador Amri, thank you very much. Ambassador Joan, thank you very much. Ambassador Rodrigo, thank you very much. Mr. West, wishing you, all of you, a very good day and good work, team from you.
Bye, thank you.
And good team, Amy, thank you very much. Pelayo,
Thank you very much.
Lavania,
Thank you.
Rim, thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye, Marco.
Bye-bye, Mr. Liu.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Nico, bye-bye.